So, hi everyone, good to have you here. And in this video, I'd like to share my experience about how our unconscious is conditioned and how there are different aspects of conditioning of our unconscious. And a few years ago, I also heard, oh, unconscious and ooh, who knows what is there, like the definition of Freud, something one has to be kind of scared of, and it's dark and something like that. And also recently, friends and clients have asked me, like, Martin, okay, what does that mean, unconscious? And what is the unconscious according to Freud? But also, what is the unconscious according to what we use in hypnosis, which is the intelligent, the benign, the wise unconscious, which helps you to solve your problems. So, when looking into the aspects of the unconscious, I feel that it's helpful to look at how evolution has formed our brain. And in a very simple model of the brain, one would have a look at three systems. So the first would be the reptile brain. The second would be the mammalian brain, but just in very, very, very simple terms. And these have heavily conditioned us. So when we look at our reptile brain, it's basically optimized for survival of, let's say, myself, of ourself. So it includes things like fear, like, oh, there is a danger, I should run away or I should avoid it. It consists of things like anger, when there is a danger and I fight against it, or I have a territory, someone invades it and I fight against it in order to survive. And also things like reproduction, sex drive, which is also in our reptile brain and which evolution has conditioned us with in order to reproduce, to survive as a species. So this conditioning of our unconscious, of our reptile brain, that is there for all of us. And even though back in those old times, when, let's say, we were reptiles in a way, it was really useful, and it's a very useful heuristics. Just, oh, it's something fearful, okay, maybe I should just run. Like, I don't know if you have experienced that when you go hiking and you see a small animal and a small animal just runs away. It senses you and it just runs away. So this is a heuristic which has helped them to survive. And we are still under that conditioning. So these programs of especially fear, of anger, of sex drive, and probably other things, they're still running, they're still on. And it's not something what would be a problem or something we should do something against it. It's just important that we notice that they're there, these feelings, that they're there, and we find peace with it. In my opinion, that's what I see has helped me personally most, and what has also helped my clients most. So it's very important also to notice that these things are not intuition. So take fear, for example. It's a very simple heuristic, but it's often not very clever. It's optimized for survival. It's skewed in a way to help us to survive, and everything else like doesn't matter. But it's often, especially in our complex world, it's not very intelligent usually. So whenever you ask yourself, okay, is that my intuition really talking to me or is it something else? Then I would invite you to just double check if these things are involved. So I'm not saying that fear is something, again, we should get rid of or it's something bad. It's just a very, very, very simple heuristics. And in our complex world, it often doesn't help us. It doesn't help us to grow, to explore new things. Often it holds us back. So just be conscious about that. Then the second type of our conditioning, which I believe is important, is the mammalian brain. So basically us being conditioned to live in a group, to be group animals. And again, this is also optimized for survival, and it's optimized for the survival of the group, but also optimized for yourself, how you can survive in the group as an individual. And these things still have huge influence in our lives still. So take, for example, shame. So why do we feel shame when we are in the group? There is a kind of fear in the background that it doesn't look good in the group. So that kind of, if I do something where I feel shame, which was not good, then I don't want the other group members to know, or maybe you know this gesture like, oh, no one should see me, because I want to make sure that my value in the group, the image which the group has of me, is high, to maintain a certain status, a certain position in the group. And that is a typical group conditioning, because if you look at evolution, if you're a herd animal and you kind of have to protect yourself against animals who want to eat you, then if you are inside the group, in the core, you're quite safe compared to if you were at the outskirts of the group. So let's say a lion comes, the lion will eat the animal on the outside of the group. And so there is an instinct to be connected to the group, to not get abandoned from the group, and also to be inside of the group. And actually what happens in herds is that the older and weaker animals are kind of pushed outside of the group, to the outskirts of the group, and the stronger, they can maintain a position which is more in the middle of the group. So the weaker and the older are getting eaten, which is quite cruel, but this is how it is. But it helps to survive. It helps for the survival of the whole group. So if you're an animal in such a group, you will want to make sure that you're in the middle and that you're not the one who is outside. Because if you're outside, you know there is a higher likelihood to get eaten. So you kind of want to be in the group. And if the group has a good image of you as a valuable member of the group, then probably you will be more in the middle of the group. Again, this is something very, very unconscious. But if your image in the group is not good, if the group feels that you're not good enough or that you're a loser or whatever, then the group would kind of push you outside the animal group, and then there is the danger to get eaten. So just the example for shame, you want to belong to the group and want to be in the core group. So again, this has been probably really helpful when we were living in the wild and everything, but maybe now it's not always that helpful. But still, these types of conditioning, they're still going on. So we're still conditioned to that in our unconscious. Other examples would be pride, for example, which is also a group emotion, or guilt is also an emotion in the mammalian brain. And I know friends and clients who have told me, oh my God, I feel so guilty. Like guilt is a very important emotion to me. And again, this is something one should explore for oneself. One should get a feel for guilt and also know that it's an ancient conditioning which is still active. Another example for an emotion of conditioning of a mammalian is attachment. So we, especially when we grow up as children, we need someone to attach to regulate our nervous system, to learn from, to be safe. So we are conditioned to a certain attachment within the group or with people. And again, this is good to know, I believe, that especially as a child or in evolution, this was really important. But sometimes today in our modern world, this can be in a way abused also. So take, for instance, a brand which you use and which creates this empathy with you, be it an electronic brand or something like body lotion or whatever. It creates a bond with you. It creates an attachment with you. It builds up this trust, this warm feeling, right? And we are conditioned to search for that. We want that. But also we are kind of vulnerable that this is getting exploited. And marketing companies, believe me, they're really, really smart in knowing your buttons and pushing your buttons one after the other. And then you fall into basically a trap or into their web, which they want, just because your unconscious conditioning is programmed for that. So in the moment you kind of see the game which is played, when you see this unconscious conditioning, how others abuse it and how it works in the present moment in this world, then you can kind of let it go, because you see, well, the attachment is probably more optimized towards family, towards the tribe, towards parents, towards children especially, but not towards some kind of brand. So again, in your life, I would invite you, maybe not now, but in the next days, to just check and be conscious of where you're emotionally attached to things which give you a certain connection, a sense of belonging, a certain sense of love. And this is also something which interferes with intuition. It's not intuition. Another example would be the seeking for reward. So basically, as an animal, just going out, trying to find a more clever way to find food or water or whatever it is. And I actually had to think, when I first read about that, the seeking for reward, I had to think twice, like, oh, what does this actually mean? But then I realized I am heavily conditioned to that. And almost everything I do, not everything, but almost everything, is part of this conditioning of looking for pleasure, for looking for reward, for happiness, and trying to figure out some smart solutions to have more reward. And of course, in our complex world, this looks very complex, this looking for reward, finding clever ways to look for reward. In the animal world, it was a little bit more easy, more simple, finding more clever ways to find food, find water, and so on. Okay, so this was the mammalian brain, and I feel another type of conditioning of the unconscious, which is really, really, really important, especially for human beings, is the conditioning of society. And again, I think when you're a child, you are not 100% aware of what is going on, but you probably feel that something's strange because you have maybe an inner feeling of this should be right. And your parents say something else. Your parents say, you should do your homework, don't behave like this, don't look like this, don't laugh like this. Whatever parents come up with sometimes in their parenting mode. Make sure that this is clean, like you have to be a good girl or a good boy, because if not, then this happens, then this punishment. So it's in the beginning, it's our parents which condition us with rules, with some people also call it shoulds. So you should behave like this, you should be like this, you should feel like this, you should act like this, which kind of goes counter your instincts and intuition of a child. But of course, since we as children are quite vulnerable and we look for connection, and also very instinctively, and this is what I see in many, many hypnosis sessions, that at the core of that is the survival instinct. So in order to survive, I suppress my own instincts, what I feel is right, and what I actually feel and I believe that this is reality. I suppress all that, and I accept what the parents tell me about what I should feel, what I should think, what should be right, and so on. So this is something what is, I would probably say, a part of trauma, which is what we most work on in hypnosis session. Because there is a conflict installed within ourselves. So you, as with your deep feeling of what is right, you go against what parents or society have told you that this is how it should be, how you should be. And there is this conflict between the two. And this is an incredible waste of energy and an incredible source of unhappiness. So if you have the chance to ever look at these things more in detail, whether be it with a tool like hypnosis or with something else, then do it. I can guarantee you it's absolutely worth it. And another part of the conditioning of society is how basically the norms, the rules condition us. And these things are absolutely not set in stone. They're not carved in stone. It's not something fixed. And this is something you see when you go to other countries. And I personally, I love to travel. And I think I love to travel to other countries, particularly for that reason, that I see that they have a totally different social conditioning than I have. And this kind of helps me to go out of my, in that case, German conditioning, and to see that, well, this is not fixed. This is not who I really am. This is something what is imposed on me by society, by culture, by norms. And again, because this is something what goes so much and so often against our innermost feelings, our innermost desires, our innermost knowing what is right, there is again a big conflict created between the two. And this conflict, again, is a source of losing so much energy, which is not available, and also a big source of unhappiness. But also, of course, this social conditioning, these social norms, they serve a certain purpose. And I believe it's also a purpose of survival. So whereas the other two types of conditioning was more the survival of myself, the group, or myself in the group, This is more how we organize society in a way that we can live together more or less, hopefully, peacefully, and we don't harm each other. So that's why these rules, in principle, they have their place. They kind of make sense. But again, it's in a way arbitrary, and it goes against our innermost feelings, of our innermost knowing what is right. And that's why it's good to see these rules as for what they are. It's a heuristic tool to help us to live better together. It's not something fixed. Every society has very different rules, how they try to accomplish that. And following these rules is definitely not intuition. It's definitely not following your voice, your inner voice. So it's good to be aware of that. For instance, when you take a decision, a small decision or a big decision, just have a look at how many of these shoulds, which come from society, are involved. How many of these rules are involved which you feel you should follow. And if you're aware of that, I guarantee you that you will be, just because you're aware of it, you don't follow it so much, and you will follow your inner voice much, much, much more easily. The fourth type of conditioning of the unconscious is experiences in our life which have had an impact on us, or just in general experiences. This is something what we work on in sessions really a lot. So a typical example is when in the present moment I feel in a way which is not rational, I act in a way which is very strange, and it's kind of clear that this feeling, this acting, is not adequate to the present moment, to what is actually happening here in the now. But it comes from somewhere else. It comes probably from the past. What I see in my hypnosis practice is that often these are single events which are really forgotten, consciously forgotten. But unconsciously they still go on because our implicit memory, our feelings, they remember and they get activated in certain situations again. So this is definitely unconscious in that moment, you're not aware of it. But if in a session you go into it, you go into the feeling, into the situation, then after a while, almost like magically, the old situation comes up, you can have a look at it, and very often it's looking from an adult perspective, it's something minor. Very often. But for the child, it was crazy. It was most often a matter of life and death. And this has to be valued, this has to be processed. And if these things are processed, and very often it's just 1 or 2 sessions, then there is such a big relief for my clients. Because this inner fight, this inner resistance, which in the past has been going on, is released. And also the fight in the present, which is like, oh, I feel like this, I act like this, but I should not act like this because it doesn't make sense, so I have to kind of suppress it. So this, again, waste of energy is also dissolved. So, of course, there are not only bad experiences, there are also a lot of good experiences which shape our unconscious. And ideally, when you grow up as a child in the first 3 years, you're just flooded with love, with affection, with care, with safety. And if that happens, then you carry this positive unconscious conditioning throughout your whole life. And of course, if that was not there, then you carry this, whatever then has occurred, which is probably a certain sense of abandonment, of not being good as one is, a certain sense of insecurity. One carries that throughout one's life. So really past experiences, the good and the bad, condition us really, really, really heavily. But this condition is definitely something what one can change. It's unlike the fear and the anger, which are apps which you kind of cannot uninstall because they're ingrained in the hardware. These things are luckily on the, let's call it, software level, and these are apps in a very simple. I like to use this analogy because it's something which we talk about all day in these times. It's like of an app which you can uninstall or which you can process, which you can change. So this is basically the good news for the life experiences, that they can be changed, because our unconscious does not distinguish between things which actually have happened or between the imagination, which is kind of put into the unconscious. So another aspect of our unconscious conditioning is what I would call automated habits or certain automated behavior. So as children, we learn how to run, we learn how to ride a bike, we learn even how to eat, how to walk. And then when we grow up, we learn many other things, how to play with balls, or much later, how to drive a car. So these things are very automated things, or how to use tools. So we have learned them consciously once, but now they're unconscious, automated programs. Often also these are habits, so things we do habitual because we have repeated them so often and we have kind of conditioned ourselves to do it. These are also these types of self-conditioning which we have imposed on ourselves. This is something you can definitely also change quite easily. And also this is something what is definitely not intuition, or is a player which plays against intuition. Because imagine you have a habit, you have done it like this for a year, for 10 years, whatever. Then there will be this unconscious drive to continue your habit. And once you're very conscious of that, of this unconscious habit, let's say, or of this unconscious drive of the habit, and you know that that is not intuition, that is not what some people call it soul, or your inner knowing, your inner wisdom is telling you to do, or what you actually deep in your heart want to do, then you can kind of put this aside and you know, okay, this is probably not intuition, this is just my conditioning talking to me, my self-conditioning talking to me. Also, a part of this conditioning, of this automated habitual conditioning, is when we program our unconscious. So this is something I do sometimes, and I show it to my clients how they can do it themselves. It's actually very simple, although for different people, different methods would work here. And you kind of install a certain program, a certain idea, a certain goal, a certain habit within your unconscious. So this you can do it on your own. And then your unconscious will work towards that. So either if it's a goal, it will work towards that goal. Or if it's like a one-off thing, then, so for example, I like to, instead of writing things down or whatever, when I want to really make sure that I think and I remember to do something, then I like to delegate it to my unconscious. So for instance, okay, next time when I go out of my house, I have to remember taking this or doing this. And then actually in the moment when I go out, I open a door. It's not conscious, but my unconscious is like, there was something you should think about. What was that? I really stopped and I'm like, oh right, there was something. What was it? And it's like, boom, yeah, this is what I wanted to think about. And like, every time this happens, I'm like so grateful for my unconscious that it remembered me. But in a way, it's this self-programming of the unconscious, putting this pattern, this goal in the unconscious, conditioning myself with that, and then the unconscious pattern basically unfolds and delivers whatever I have asked for. So this is also what some people call manifesting, when it's about bigger things, to program the unconscious for whatever, finding a good partner, for being more happy, for quitting smoking, for earning more money, whatever it is. And then you kind of, it's like installing an app again. For some reason, I like this analogy. And installing it in your unconscious, this goal in the unconscious, and then your unconscious will work automatically to achieve this for you. So what I have shown you here, these are some aspects of the conditioning of our unconscious, of what is in our unconscious. And it's not all the aspects, but it's what I believe are the very important aspects emotionally for us, and also when taking decisions, to know that, okay, this is not my intuition, this is something else, and I know what this is, and I won't listen to it. So you probably also saw that these things we talked about, this is not something dark, this is not something bad or fearful or something I should be afraid of. Some people are really afraid of their own minds, of their unconscious, what is there. But these things they're not something we should be afraid of. These things are just there. And if we acknowledge them, that they're there, that they are there for a reason, be it either for survival, or be it either that society wants to make rules so that we can all live together, or be it experiences which we had in lives, or some goals which we set ourselves, maybe long ago, which don't fit now anymore. If you realize all that, then these things kind of lose their power on us. And we tend to see much more clearly. And if we see much more clearly, if our mind is more silent, then our inner wisdom, what we deep in ourselves know what is the right thing to do, that has space to come out and to flourish. So some people call it a silent voice. That's why I put my name on social media as Silent Voice of Clarity, because this is what best describes intuition to me. This silent voice, you can hear it much more louder, because you can distinguish all the noise from outside from this clear and silent voice. And again, this silent voice, this wise, intelligent, silent voice, this intuition is something different from all that conditioning. I probably will have to do a whole video or a few videos just on the topic of intuition. But in short, how I feel intuition is that it's an intelligent part of me, which is very, very, very wise, very intelligent, which just wants the best for me. But also in a way, it's not skewed towards something. It's quite neutral. So especially it's not skewed towards, I need to achieve this, like a neurotic drive, like if I'm not achieving this, I'm not happy. And it's not skewed towards fearing things like, oh my God, this might be dangerous, so I should go away from that. It's not skewed. But of course, it will give you a wise advice, or you will be able to decide wisely if you listen more to your intuition. And I often call the intuition the intelligence of the silent mind. So maybe you have had that experience that if you are very calm, maybe after holidays or being in the woods, if your mind is very calm, then you tend to see things very clearly and you know what is right to do. You just know it. And that is intuition, the intelligence of the silent mind. Because if the mind is getting very noisy with all the influences which we have in the modern world, but also very noisy of all our conditioning, which I talked in this video, which is kind of you are getting caught up in this conditioning, but also the world, the marketing, the influencers in a way, it could be companies or whatever, they kind of catch you with your conditioning, creating more and more and more noise. And if there is this noise, you cannot decide, because it's like 5 different voices in your mind, each pulling into different directions, and you just don't know what the right direction is. You don't know. And if you recognize all these voices, all this conditioning, let them be for what it is, then you have a much higher chance to connect to your intuition, to your inner knowledge. And of course, if you watch that video, you listen to it in a theoretical way, because you listen to it with words, because words are the tool which I can use to convey something to you. But I really invite you to test this out in your life, to test this out with small decisions, with big decisions, and to test out what are the voices which are speaking at the same time. What are they? What type of conditioning are they? What type of self-conditioning, of society conditioning, of reptile mammalian conditioning? What type of conditioning are they? And to recognize it for what it is, to leave it there, and to have a look, what is it what you really want in your core? What is it what you believe is the right thing to do? And then do that. And I really hope that this video has helped you for your best, for your life. I'm very happy to get to know your ideas about this, and happy if you liked the video, if you share it with others, if it has been useful to you. And yeah, looking forward to see you in the next video. Bye.